Hey, I'm Tyler with the Econ Tutoring Center. We're going to be going over the loanable funds market. This is going to be kind of confusing, and keep in mind, especially this time, that your notation might be different. What we're going to use here is from the ManQ book, so just keep that in mind while you're learning about this. So this is a loanable funds market. It just looks like a normal supply and demand graph, but it is a little bit more complicated. Some people get confused by it. So what this is, as it sounds like, it is the loanable funds, the supply and demand of funds for loaning money, basically. So what the supply is savings, basically. It's what people have that they're willing to lend out and get an interest rate back on. And demand, what that is people, so you think about it, just individual people, they need to buy houses or cars or something, and they don't necessarily have all that money in cash that they can just spend all at once, so they need to borrow money from lenders to pay for like mortgages or loans or something like that. Or you could think of it like with firms, they need to buy a new factory or new equipment, they need to loan or borrow that money from somebody. So that's the demand. Supply is just basically people wanting, who have that extra money, that are willing to loan it out to get an interest rate in return. So what is on the axes is the x-axis is quantity, just like normal. It's the quantity of loanable funds, the amount of funds that people are willing to loan or borrow. And on the y-axis is the real interest rate. Now, that might not seem quite straightforward, but the real interest rate is essentially the price for borrowing and lending. So just at equilibrium, there's a certain quantity of loanable funds, however many dollars, and on the y-axis, the equilibrium price is the interest rate, because if the interest rate is low, the lenders aren't going to want to give their money out because they're not getting very much back on it. They're getting a low price for their lending, basically, which is why the quantity of supply goes down when interest rate goes down. And when the interest rate's high, people who are trying to borrow money, they have to pay a way higher price to borrow it, so they're going to want to borrow less, so that's why the demand curve is downward sloping. Alright, so that was a pretty basic overview of the loanable funds market, but we can get a little bit more specific with supply. I know that they do this in the ManQ book. It might be different, keep in mind. But how he defines supply of loanable funds is national savings. So what is national savings? And you think about it, it's all of this savings in the economy. And what it is, it's private savings, which is the amount of money that people have left over after they've consumed. You know, it's basically their income minus consumption. They have this savings that they may be willing to lend out to borrowers at a specific interest rate. And then, so it's private savings plus public savings. Alright, so what public savings is the government. So it's basically what the government has after it consumes. So if the government has a balanced budget, it means it's spending what it takes in, and so public savings and the budget deficit would equal zero. So if they're running a budget deficit, if they're spending more than they're taking in, public savings would be negative because they have negative money, essentially. And if they're running a surplus, it means they're spending less than they're taking in, they have money left over, public savings is positive. Alright, so I hope that helps you understand the loanable funds market a little bit better. In more videos, we're going to be going over some examples of what happens when these curves shift, what caused them to shift, and what the results are of it. We're just going to be going over how this is actually used in practice. So if you have any questions, comment on the YouTube page or watch the next videos.